This is RCEA Board Clerk Lori Taketa with some housekeeping announcements. The microphones again are on throughout the meeting. Today, if you are having a hard time hearing any speaker, please raise your hand. We do have one microphone. We're experimenting with another way to amplify so we can hear each other. Just raise your hand and I'll run the microphone over to whoever is speaking, okay? And when you're speaking, please introduce yourself when you start talking, and please don't talk over each other because then nobody online will be able to hear you. So there are no remote participating board members today. For community members who might be online and participating in public comment period, you can raise your hand in the webinar controls or press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute by phone. Please raise your hand early so that staff has a chance to recognize that you would like to speak. Emailed public comments are being accepted at publiccomment@redwoodenergy.org until the chair closes the public comment period for that agenda item. And remote participants, if your meeting connection is disrupted, please notify us if you can by calling or texting 707-382-7336, the number on the screen, or by emailing publiccomment@redwoodenergy.org. Vice Chair Wu?
All right, thank you, Lori. So I'd like to welcome everybody. This is the Redwood Coast Energy Authority meeting of July 24th, 2025. And may I have a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair. Director Arroyo?
Here.
Chair Bauer is absent. Director Diaz?
Here.
Director Garachi is absent. Director Jorgensen?
Here.
Director Ramos?
Here.
Director Scafani?
Here.
Director Schaefer?
Here.
Director Tuttle?
Here.
Director Wilson?
Here.
Vice Chair Wu?
Here.
There is a quorum.
Thank you. All right, so let's see. Let's care of that page. Did the roll call. Okay, now we're into reports for member entities. Is there anybody on the board who'd like to make a report? Go for it, Natalie.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I'm sure I'm going to steal a tiny bit of Beth's thunder, but for her report later, I wanted to share that I saw several of you there at the battery energy storage or the energy storage community conversation that RCEA held last night in Arcata at the D Street Community Center. But I just think it was a real success, great turnout. I understand it was recorded, so hopefully folks that didn't get a chance to go can still see some of that content. And Richard did just such a wonderful job covering the content. And so I just wanted to thank staff for putting that together. And obviously there was a lot of community interest in the topic. So great job.
Thanks, Natalie. Anybody else? Okay, not seeing anybody else. So I'm gonna close that part. Next, we're gonna move on to oral and written communications. This is time provided for people to address the board or submit written communications on matters that are not on the agenda. And so is there anybody here who would like to say something at this point? And nobody, is there anybody online?
There are, but no one has raised their hands.
Okay, very good. So going once. Okay, we are closing oral and written communications. Next up, we have the consent calendar. All matters on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the board and are enacted in one motion, but we don't have to do that. We can pull whatever we want to pull to discuss separately. And so I'll go ahead and read it all first, and then I'll go out to the board and see if anybody wants to pull anything. Then I'll go out to the public and see if they want to hear anything. So 4.1, approved minutes of the June 26, 2025 board meeting. 4.2, accept the disbursements report for May 2025 and financial reports for this fiscal year through May 2025. Award the design build agreement to Stevens Electrical to perform the design build services for the energy resilience at rural fire stations, the rural fire station project, for a not to exceed value of $1.7 million through December 31st, 2026. and authorize the executive director to execute all the applicable documents. 4.4, receive the federal activity report. And 4.5, award a professional services agreement to Sacramento Municipal Utilities District, SMUD, to perform the Northern Rural Energy Network commercial energy assessment for a not to exceed value of $187,610, and authorize the executive director to execute all applicable documents. So is there anybody from the board who want to pull any of these and discuss them separately? Not seeing anybody on the board. How about, we have very few public here, nobody there. And then how about online?
Going online.
All right, I'll entertain a motion on the consent calendar.
I will make a motion to adopt the consent calendar.
I'll second. Yeah.
How to do it, people. How to do it.
I'll let Lori pick. Okay, she's got it. And we can just do all in favor, right? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Motion passes.
All right, so good. Okay, now we're moving into CCE business, and we do have a quorum, right?
Yes.
So CCE business consent calendar, there is nothing. Old CCE business, there is nothing, but item 8.1. CCA presentation on electricity market regionalization. What do we have for that?
So Faith is joining us online. She's going to introduce the presentation, and then we'll have folks from Cal CCA presenting.
Okay, great.
Hey there, Faith Carlson. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. I'm the Regulatory and Legislative Policy Manager for Redwood Coast Energy Authority, here to kick us off. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the California Community Choice Association, or Cal CCA, is a trade association that is going to be presenting today. They represent the interests of existing and emerging community choice aggregators. And their mission is to create a legislative and regulatory environment that supports the development and long-term sustainability of locally run community choice aggregation providers in California. Cal CCA specifically supports our CEA through education, technical guidance, and regulatory and legislative advocacy. And there you'll see a photo of Cal CCA staff, our CEA staff at the Cal CCA 2025 conference. We engage with Cal CCA through participation in the Cal CCA board, various committees, and discussion groups. And we're most active in the regulatory, legislative, billing operations, customer care, procurement, equity, and compliance committees, as well as in the federal policy discussion group. Within the legislative committee, our CEA uses our policy platform to take positions on pending legislation in order to help Cal CCA build consensus and take a public position. Cal CCA staff then develop legislative strategy and engage policymakers, and a similar process is conducted within regulatory and other committees. Some topics that they've helped us work through recently include the PCIA, resource adequacy, renewable portfolio standard, power source disclosure, and reforms to integrated resource planning or future resource development. That said, sometimes there are instances when a policy falls outside of the scope of our policy platform, and we have to have a meeting such as this one with the board to get guidance from you all on what position to take. So today they're here to present to us on regionalization, which is an example of a policy that does not fall within our policy platform. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Cal CCA for your introductions and then to take over. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Evelyn Call, and I'm the General Counsel and Chief Policy Officer for Cal CCA. And I have with me today Lauren Carr, who's a Senior Regulatory Manager. And we've put together a presentation for you on SB 540, which is the legislative vehicle that we're going to talk about today, and just generally on the idea of regionalization. So next slide, please. The question is, why are we having this conversation today? And I think Faith highlighted that it is a bill, SB 540, and it isn't in your platform. So there needs to be some work in understanding what the bill is and what it does for you and your customers. The whole idea comes from a letter from a group of Western regulators in the summer of 2023. And they included commissioners from the CPUC and the CEC. And they started something that turned into the Pathways Initiative. And the Pathways Initiative comprises stakeholders from throughout the West. And we've been building a framework to expand Western regional markets for the last 2 years. It resulted in a what we call the Step 2 proposal last spring from the Pathways Initiative. But for California to participate in a new regional market, legislation was required. So Senator Becker introduced SB 540, and that framework would allow California to participate in broader regional markets. And we'll talk about the status of the bill at the end of our conversation. But I thought we could dive in with a few basics. And I warn you in advance, it's a very dense subject, so excuse me if I oversimplify or if it's still not simple enough. Most important, what is it that we're trying to achieve here from your perspective, from the perspective of your customers? And it's kind of a very simple high-level statement, which is we're trying to expand the geographic footprint of existing energy markets, because studies show that if we expand the footprint, it's going to increase benefits to California consumers, and that includes RCEA customers, on 3 different planes. And we'll talk about each of those: affordability, reliability, and climate. But let's start with some simple terms, because I think a lot of this gets glossed over with assumptions that everyone kind of understands what's being talked about, but it's very archaic. So let's start with some basics. When we're talking about regional, what is it we're talking about? And as you can see on this map here, this is the Western area. The electric grid across the country is separated into 6 different transmission grids that aren't interconnected, and each has their own unique reliability and security needs. So California lies in the Western interconnection. Its transmission is connected physically with other states in the Western region. And that broadly interconnected grid is referred to as the Western Electricity Coordinating Council, or the WEC, you may have heard of. It includes 14 Western states, 2 Canadian provinces, and Baja California, Mexico. So when we say West, what we're really talking about is this Western WEC footprint. What do we mean when we say markets? And again, people gloss over this, but I think it's really important to understand what we are doing and what we're not doing. So when we use the term markets, and this we're referring to,
Sorry.
we're referring to organized markets that in this case are run by the California Independent System Operator, and where buyers bid to buy and sellers bid to sell their electric energy. And so today, RCEA sells, I presume, and buys from the CAISO markets the electric energy they have. They might buy extra energy to fill short positions or sell energy to fill long positions. And while there are different types of electricity products we could be talking about, you've probably heard of resource adequacy, renewable portfolio standards, credits, there are many others. We're focused solely today on the formal trading of electric energy among buyers and sellers, and kind of like an energy stock market. And so our use of the term markets excludes operation of the transmission grid. And this is something people miss a lot. We're not talking about who controls the wires. We're only talking about that trading, that kind of stock market-like function for electricity. And we are not talking about the many other functions we'll identify for the CAISO. And when we're talking about regional coordination or regionalization, what we really mean is growing the footprint, making it more broadly inclusive from a regional standpoint. So we're including other participants. And as I said, the greater the footprint, the better the benefits for your customers. So when we talk about markets, which markets are we trying to expand? And on this slide, it talks about the California Independent System Operator. And the California Independent System Operator does many things, which we'll talk about. But today it operates what's called the Western Imbalanced Energy Market, affectionately WEAM. And this is a market that fills in around the edges in real-time trading. Today, we have some participants from other states that have started engaging in the market, but we want that footprint to grow. And to date, this is really important. This market has delivered over $2 billion of savings to California consumers. So it's been a wild success, and we'd like more of it, I guess is the answer. The CAISO is also developing an extended day-ahead market to complement its real-time market. So that's your bidding that you do, buying and selling the day ahead of the actual flow day. And the regional day-ahead market will launch in 2026. And again, we're expecting some benefits from this, and we want it to be as large a footprint as it can possibly be to maximize the benefits to customers. And growing the footprint is a problem, and it's all about control. Surprise, surprise. CAISO markets today are governed by a board that is selected by the California governor. That's statutory. So everything that goes on at the CAISO is determined by that board. Other states don't particularly want to participate in a market that's controlled by one state, and particularly California. They want a more representative governance. So the problem is that these participants today have choices. If they aren't pleased with the way that the market's being developed in California, they have the Arkansas-based Markets Plus market that is starting to be developed. And it's courting the same participants that we're hoping to gain. So it's kind of competition between Arkansas, and a Western-based market. So let's dive down on the next page to the CAISO's role in all of this. So this shows what the CAISO does today. And what it does today is a full suite of activities. It does transmission planning, transmission operation, which is a central role. It operates as a balancing authority, making sure there's enough energy within its boundaries every day to make the grid work. It coordinates reliability throughout the West. And it does energy markets, which we just talked about. And there are two aspects to energy markets. The first is the operations, the mechanical operation of how the energy market works. And the second is the energy market rules, which is kind of the set of rules or the tariff that governs how those operations work. Click forward, please. And what we're doing here is simply moving the energy market rules piece here at the end to a new organization, which is currently called the regional organization. And it would have a broadly representative board from other states. So that board would be making the rules for the markets. And then by taking those rules outside of the CAISO board, there's a belief that it will attract much broader Western participation in these markets. One other point to note on this slide, because it comes up a lot, is FERC. Today, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission regulates the California Independent System Operator. You can see up here, it directly regulates the CAISO. And it approves and rejects changes to market rules that the CAISO makes. So it is CAISO jurisdictional. The regional organization likewise would be FERC jurisdictional, and the FERC would approve and reject changes to the market rules. So in sense of FERC jurisdiction, nothing is really changing. It's simply being split between the CAISO, who's doing all these other functions, and the new regional organization who will be making the market rules. And when I say market rules, what I mean by that is rules that show how you bid into the market, how you settle prices, how things are dispatched. There are all kinds of rules that govern operations that are in the tariff. Next page. What's really, really important to California is that the things that we hold near and dear to our heart will not change. So the California PUC or other governing bodies today really oversee many of these functions. So procurement, which you're familiar with, the IRP, the Integrated Resource Planning, that is state jurisdictional and will remain state jurisdiction. the renewable portfolio standard and the GHG targets, state jurisdiction, resource adequacy, state jurisdiction, rate making, distribution planning, building electrification, transportation, energy efficiency. All of these things remain squarely within the scope of state jurisdiction and will remain outside of the scope of federal jurisdiction. Next slide. So now that the question of why are we doing this, right? What's compelling us and why are we so excited about this? And again, I've told you several times, expanding the footprint increases benefits. And so there have been a couple of different studies, one by the Brattle Group, which was commissioned by the California Energy Commission, and then a smaller study on reliability by the Stanford Institute. So there are studies out there that discuss these benefits in great detail. So the first reason, as I mentioned, is the affordability question, right? And what the estimate is that compared to today's situation, there will be an additional $1.1 billion per year of savings to California consumers. And if you look at the bills that are pending in Sacramento right now, this is the biggest affordability bill out there, and it's really critical that it gets moved. And that $1.1 billion comes from the fact that we are dispatching resources that are lower cost, perhaps filling in from other states. And we are reducing the curtailment of renewable resources. CCAs have contracts for renewable resources. I suspect you do too. And often those renewable resource contracts are curtailed. You still have to pay for them as if you're getting the energy, but you're not able to monetize the energy in the market. So you have to go buy additional energy. In a sense, when that curtailment happens, you're paying twice for your energy. So for that reason, it's really important that this market broaden itself so that curtailment can decline. Next, increased supply reliability. 4 years ago, 3 years ago, the whole state was up in arms over reliability. We faced outages, blackouts. Even Sacramento, the legislators were very, very concerned about it. And so what this does is it gives us access to a much broader supply during emergency conditions. And because of the geographic diversity we have throughout the West, the likelihood of everyone being in emergency in the West at the same time is pretty limited. So in an emergency now, we have an additional supply cushion of 25 gigawatts, which may not mean much to you, but our peak requirement for electricity is, a little over 50. So it's a big chunk of extra supply cushion. Next, we have reduced GHG emissions. And so they'll be much lower in California, 35 to 40%, and roughly 3% in WEC. So, there is a little bit of a distributed effect there, but there is a reduction in carbon emissions. And importantly, the state of Oregon, for example, says, send us your solar to replace some of our resources because we'd love to have some of that during the midday. So it will reduce their emissions as well. And then finally, it reduces reliance on gas-fired generation, which for some CCAs is a critical goal, and therefore it will reduce pollutants, criteria pollutants as well. Next slide. So the timeline for this, it's going to be a long one. We're hoping to enact legislation, SB 540, by September, October, get it signed by the governor. We're working now on the corporate documents, the corporate governance documents, so that probably by November or December, we can file the bylaws and the articles of incorporation. And then by October of 2026, into the second quarter of 2027, the RO will be negotiating with the CAISO to make the interface between them work, and will be working on its tariff that it will then seek FERC approval in probably the third quarter of 2027. And if we're super lucky, we will implement in January 2028. But I think, the likelihood of that's pretty slim because there's a lot of work to do. So this is the timeline. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's coming. Next slide. Finally, where are we with SB 540? So there's a huge coalition that has been supporting SB 540. It's the biggest coalition I've ever seen. And you have us working with IBEW, you have the utilities working with CCAs, you have Enviros working with all of us. It's really an amazing coalition. And as a result, the bill passed out of the Senate Policy Committee without opposition, and it passed off the floor without opposition. So, you know, coming out of the Senate, it was unopposed. However, there were changes made in the Senate. Senate Judiciary made some amendments that were rather poison pills. And then actually through appropriations, the pro tem made some changes that were also very much poison pills. So now we're stuck with this bill with a few ugly provisions in it that we have to work out. And it's currently sitting in the Assembly where the big three are negotiating, the Senate, the Assembly, and the governor. And they had started on it 2 weeks ago. We have a high degree of confidence that they're going to reach an acceptable solution. And as I said, it's a priority for the governor right now. I think he's made that clear. The Assembly Speaker has also endorsed the objectives of getting this done. So it's sitting very well right now for success. So that's a very high level overview, and I'm happy to take any questions if you have them. Or Faith or Beth, if you have any clarifications you'd like to make.
No, not necessarily a clarification, but Richard, if you wanted to give, you know, one of the potential benefits was a mention of less reliance on gas. I think we've given some thought to how that might work out here locally with a different potential outcome. So if you want to clarify that.
Yeah, it's not something we've looked into in detail, but I think just given our local grid constraints and how semi-isolated we are from the rest of the California grid, that might be less meaningful of a benefit for RCEA in particular than it is for the CAISO, you know, participants broadly. That's something we've talked about. I can't really quantify for you how much less of a benefit it might be, but we just think that's one area where we don't want to oversell the benefits to the board on that.
Yeah, okay. And I think that in all likelihood, although I haven't seen the model, I would guess that the model took that into account too, because you know, local resources aren't going to be affected.
Mm-hmm. I would say, you know, looking at that though, you know, sort of in the broader region, there's still tremendous benefit in terms of what we're trying to accomplish to see overall reductions in greenhouse gases.
Yeah, go ahead now.
I looked at the Q&A about this, the Pathways initiative on your CalCCA website, and I think my understanding of this is certainly not that well developed, but I was interested in the topic around whether it would kind of open up our markets to more coal, which it, you know, seems like you're clearly saying on here that that's not the case. But could you speak to that a little bit and how, just so that we're kind of aware of that concern?
Sure. Well, I guess where I'll start is there is already coal in our market that is owned by Pacificor. That's already an existing fact. And, you know, they've been looking at decommissioning their plants. And actually, many of the states in the West are looking at decommissioning coal. And the question is just the schedule. But when the Brattle Group did its study, it confirmed that there would be no coal imports into California under its model. So I think they're fairly certain that there isn't going to be coal coming into California.
Are they concerned that that could change in any way with federal changes around, you know, how greenhouse gas emissions are evaluated? Or I don't know if I'm tying together like just kind of an abstract concern with something that's much less abstract, but
no. Yeah, your concern is valid. I mean, many people have concerns about what's going on at the federal level and how it's going to affect this. But as I said, there are already coal resources in our market today that we live with. And so if there's going to be an effect, unfortunately, there's going to be an effect anyway. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that the resources are coming to California, because currently, and again, rules can change, but the CAISO bid process takes into account carbon costs. And if they want to sell into California, they have to bid their carbon cost. And so unless and until that changes, which again could change under any situation, I think we're probably in a good position.
Thank you. Thanks for that question, Natalie, because that's kind of where my brain went also, of just, especially even though if it's not on the market right now, that we could see incentivized from the federal government to create more of that within the market. So I see the concern that, that could change, but as long as California, remains steadfast on not wanting to import coal energy, then, I feel comfortable with that.
And the one thing I will also highlight, SB 1368 years ago enacted a prohibition on long-term contracting for coal. So a California entity cannot enter into a long-term commitment to coal, nor can it build a coal plant. So it's basically unlawful to do that. Whether there's a short-term impact sometimes, that's not prohibited. But again, I think we have the bid structure in California that helps prevent that.
Any other questions from us? I have one, and this just be like, shows my level of knowledge of this, which is like toddler style. But so I was trying to understand what this, as basically what like a regionalized market, but yet I know that when we're buying power, we have lots of power purchase agreements, and we have a lot of our stuff in place, which has been hedged, which is great. So like, how much of our purchasing would end up, we would end up going to this regionalized market? Is it very much?
Well, Richard, can you take that or give an estimate?
Or like, is that just like not even the right question to be asked?
Yeah, you're right that we have, most of our power hedged, and like an increasing fraction of that is through long-term contracts, they're like 10 years or longer, which the board has been steadily approving us entering into more and more of those. And then another portion of it is done through these short-term hedges that the Energy Authority procures on our behalf. The idea is to minimize our exposure to like the day ahead and real-time markets that Evie was talking about. And yes, our exposure to those over, the near term, the next, year to two is minimal. Our load always winds up being a little bit different than what is forecast. So we wind up either having to buy a little bit or sell a little bit, on those, very short-term transactions. But it is fairly minimal. So in terms of how much this will change financial outlook for RCA and its power procurement, that's modest.
Okay, that's good to know.
And then Richard, you don't have any contracts that are influenced by the price set at the CAISO?
No, we don't have any, like these long-term contracts that we've brought to the board are not indexed plus. So sometimes there are, like what Evie's referring to, are contracts where the price is the like CAISO day ahead price plus some, adder that's indexed to that. But that's something that we hear developers talk about, but we haven't entered contracts on that basis.
I mean, that's not a here or there of why we should support or not support this. I just had that question. Anybody else on the board? Okay, I'll take comments from the public.
No one online.
No. And how about you, Beth? You want to have anything else you want to add for us?
Yeah, well, I'll just say, I think, we have looked at this, and although, as Richard indicated, I think, we expect the impacts would be fairly minimal for our organization. I think in the sort of spirit of being, affiliated with Cal CCA and seeing the broader impacts and the broader benefits, that's partly why we wanted to bring it forward. So I think, the ask here is really to, adopt this, like Faith mentioned, it's outside of our policy platform. So it'd be kind of a one-off, yes, we can go forth and support support this along with Cal CCA. What that looks like in terms of resources we expend is really just, kind of a pro vote at the board meeting. We don't spend a lot of extra resources, lobbying for this or doing anything special for it. We really do rely on Cal CCA to help lead the effort. And that's why we're a member of this organization, because they can, that's what, so this is really just, making sure that we feel confident when we can kind of say, yes, we're on the team. And that we've brought it to you. I will say, Chair Bauer at a past meeting had mentioned he heard about this at a Cal Cities meeting. So, I want to make sure that when these issues are coming up and they're being talked about in broader settings, that you have the opportunity to hear about them here and, get your questions answered.
Great. All right, well, if there's nothing else, we have a staff recommendation to adopt the Cal CCA recommended position on SB 540. So that requires a motion, right, Bert? I'll entertain that.
I will move for adoption of the recommended position.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was a good explanation for something that was super complex. I was reading it and I wasn't getting it. So thank you for the verbal.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that was 8.1. Moving on to 8.2, 2025 California Summer Market Conditions Assessment.
Yeah, and we've got Jacqueline with TEA here or online, I think, to give us this update, which is an annual update that y'all receive.
Right. Hi, Jacqueline.
Hello. Yes, so I'm giving the summer assessment. This is very similar to what you saw last summer around this time. If we go into the first slide. So we'll start off with an overview of where California is and then dig into where Redwood specifically is set up for our summer period. So when we were thinking of summer in California, we're really at the start of it. June can be warm, but July, August, and September are our peak months. And so we're at the end of July. And we're still looking at what is going to occur on the grid in August and September. Overall, the grid as a whole is well resourced to meet the summer outlook for the peak demand in CAISO. Both the CAISO and the CEC studied this in the May-June period, released reports. Some of the numbers are shown on this slide, but essentially the peak load forecast is expected to occur in September at our ending 18 at 46,944 megawatts, which is slightly less than the forecast for last summer. The forecast is based on a 1 and 2 weather year, so assuming an average weather year, and we always know, we can get a hot summer, so it potentially could go above that. As I said, the grid is well resourced, and California has been building more solar, battery, and hybrid resources since last summer, with about 5 gigs added from last summer to the beginning of this summer. And that puts us at about 1.5 gigs over the peak forecasted summer need. The overall weather outlook for California is that it will be slightly warmer than normal temperatures. That was the outlook when we were first making this report in May and early June. So far, that heat has not materialized, and as a slide will show in a little bit, there isn't actually any expectation for above average heat for the majority of WEC in August. So if we're going to have a hot summer, it's likely to hit in September. When we look at the water year, California had about average water year. I have a slide in more detail in a moment. And the upper Pacific Northwest had below normal runoffs. So that means that overall the West has a little less hydro than we would ideally like. That being said, overall, like I said, positive outlook for California and actually for the West overall. There are always things that can happen that bring the grid to emergency conditions. Those main ones would be a west-wide heat event. That's heat occurring not just in California, but also in the Pacific Northwest and the Southwest. That was one of the root causes of the emergency grid conditions or near emergency grid conditions that occurred in summer 2020 and summer 2022. Additionally, wildfires can reduce the availability of resources or transmission. Transmission interruption can also occur for reasons other than wildfires, and unexpected large units going out, in particular nuclear facilities here in California, Diablo Canyon, or in the desert Southwest can, rock the boat a little bit when we think about grid conditions. Moving on to the next slide, just a quick jump into the temperature outlook. This is new information than what is in the published report that TEA and Redwood staff developed about a month and a half ago. So I just showed the monthly outlook for August. As you can see, there is some heat expected in sort of the Mountain West. And the East Coast has been warm. But here in California, particularly in Southern California, it's not expected to be particularly warm. That's that white area for August. And so we aren't really seeing any reason for concern in the current temperature outlook. Looking at August, September, October, there is a potential for still above average heat, and that can occur throughout the West. So we'll be watching September closely. October, if it's warm, that can increase prices, but doesn't really lead to the potential for concerns with grid reliability. Moving on to the next slide. This is just a slide on the precipitation outlook. Obviously here in California, at least in the majority of California, not Humboldt area, we don't really get rain in the summer period, but the rest of the West can get some rain. That hasn't materialized and isn't expected to materialize over the summer period. So no rain to potentially increase the hydro stores. Moving on to the next slide. This is just a look at where the West overall was resourced with water. Anything that is green or going into the shades of light blue to dark blue is average to above average, with dark blue being the highest above average. Yellow is somewhat below average, orange is less still, and red is drought conditions essentially. So as you can see, California had about an average to, in the Humboldt area, above average water conditions. Hope you all stayed dry over the winter. But the upper Pacific Northwest, where a lot of the Columbia River water basin water comes out of the mountains and flows into the rest of the West, had a below average water year. And so that overall brings the water availability lower than would be ideal for this summer. Moving into the next slide, we have a look at California's seasonal water storage. And I really like this slide because it breaks down both where the reservoirs are and where the snowpack is at. So in the bottom of the chart, you're going from the beginning of the water year, which is begins October 1st, all the way through 1 year. And the yellow is where the reservoirs are. So you can see that in October 1st, we started with above average water reservoir levels. So the light yellow is higher than that kind of darker grayish yellow below it, which is the medium reservoir level. And then as we moved into December, January area, we started to build the snowpack. We got a good start to the snow year, and that just built on top of the already above average reservoir level. That's shown in the green, and sort of the dark blue behind the green is that median snowpack. So you can see that we got, between the combination of where the reservoirs were and where the snowpack came in at, we were sort of above average throughout the winter period, and we've remained above average going into late July. So that is a positive outlook for California's hydro resources. Moving on to the next slide. This is the last slide I have that is CAISO in California general, and then we'll move into Redwood specifically. So this is a very complicated chart, but I really like it because it shows what resources are available when we have that forecasted hottest day of the summer and of the whole year. So breaking down the chart, the line is the solid black line is the load forecast for all of the CAISO balancing authority. And then the two dashed lines above it are that forecast with a planning reserve margin, essentially a buffer, two different types of looks at, what buffer do we potentially want to have for things like unit contingencies, outages on resources or transmission, or just that weather coming in higher than an average summer hot day. And then if we look at the bar chart, that those lines are the resources available to help meet that load on an hourly basis on that hottest day of the year. So, some things to draw your attention to is one, while we are building solar and batteries and other renewables as quickly as possible here in California, we are still quite dependent on the natural gas fleet, and that's shown in the orange. It's about half of the stack on this hottest day. So still really necessary to help meet the peak demand on the high load days here in California. The dark gray is Diablo Canyon. The blue is that hydro stack, well-resourced, much better than it was in 2020 or 2022. And then we start creeping into the renewables stack, particularly drawing your attention to that yellow section, which is the solar build out in California. And if you look into the evening period, hour ending 17 through roughly hour ending 23, that tan area is the battery storage resources coming on to supply additional energy from the solar that they have absorbed over the middle part of the day. And as you can see, that battery storage fleet, which has really only been built in significant amounts over the past 2 to 3 years, and it's getting built up more and more every year, that is critical to allowing California to meet its load forecast with that planning reserve margin. So this is really, we all have seen our energy rates going up in California. There's a lot of transmission and distribution things occurring on the grid that are causing those rates to go up. Generation rates are also, ticking up to some extent, partially due to building out these new resources, but they are providing significant value here in terms of giving California a much better resource stack where we feel much more confident going into the summer than we were just a few years ago. And then finally, the one last thing on this slide I'd like to point out is the red at the very top. Those are imports into the state. It used to be that California was quite reliant on imports in order to meet peak demand. Now we are less reliant because of that battery build out, but it is still an important part of that stack to help us get not just at the forecasted load levels, but the forecasted load levels with a planning reserve margin. Moving on to the next slide and focusing in on what Redwood has done to prepare for summer. The first main thing that we do is try to manage financial risk for Redwood. The CAISO is sort of responsible for managing reliability, and every load serving entity is building resources to help with that reliability need, as well as procuring RA. But for Redwood, our major concerns are ensuring that there's no significant financial impact if energy prices increase during emergency grid conditions or just heightened load days. To do that, we procure energy hedges, and RCA is fully hedged its energy supply on a forecasted basis for summer 2025. Redwood's energy risk management policy has set hedging requirements on a monthly and quarterly basis. For the Q3 summer period, the hedging requirements are that Redwood be hedged somewhere between 80% and 130%. That range is to allow staff some discretion in terms of looking at things like this resource stack. How is California set up? How is Redwood's financially set up to manage price exposure? But as the next slide will show, that we're overall quite well hedged for the summer. Additionally, Redwood has fully procured all of its necessary RA to meet compliance for Q3. So that is Redwood bringing that capacity, its fair share, to help ensure reliability for the grid. One point in our favor, as we look at the summer and going forward, this will continue to be relevant, is that we have multiple years of summer operating history to help inform these sort of hedging decisions and the RA procurement decisions. And we've seen, very challenging grid conditions and relatively mild summers. And so we take that information into account between Redwood staff and TA staff when we're trying to make the decisions about how hedged to go into the summer. And then finally, Redwood and TA have established a procedure that we call VIPER, which we kind of tortured the acronym here to get to VIPER, but Volatile Incoming Pricing Event Response. Essentially, we have a set protocol in place to ensure that communication and alignment occurs between our two organizations in the case of any sort of pricing event, adverse pricing event that could impact Redwood. And so we have that protocol set up. We set it up last spring, ran through it once last summer, had a couple of VIPER events called, and we're ready for utilizing that protocol should it become necessary this summer. Moving on to the next slide, this just shows the energy hedge position for the sort of heavier load, peak energy need conditions. So blue is Redwood, the blue line is Redwood's forecasted load. The dark red is the generation expected from Redwood's PPAs, and that would be things like HSC, and especially Sandrini is providing a lot of solar energy during the middle part of the day in the summer periods when the sun is shining. And then we top off with a little bit additional hedges to bring you a little bit more procured. One thing to note is that this is looking at sort of a span of hours, and when we're doing this analysis, we're looking at it on an hourly basis, also looking at stochastic analysis here, not just a deterministic, but trying to consider what are all the different grid conditions that we could see, how likely are they, and then what are the financial impacts to Redwood. Moving on to the next slide, and this is my second to last slide, just one of the summer preparedness steps we take is to look at contracted resources and ensure that they are all operating as expected, that they will be available to the CAISO, as expected to meet the grid needs, and everything is operating as expected. Cove Hydro isn't generating right now. It's offline for the summer. That's to be expected because it's a small run-of-river hydro, and it's really based, its generation is based on how often has it rained recently. Sandrini Solar is operating well. The battery component is under construction. TA and Redwood staff are monitoring that closely with an expected COD of that battery component at the end of this year. And then the two local resources that you have coming online soon are Foster Clean Power A and B. And those are right now in the testing stage. We hope to have them online potentially in a few weeks. So that will be really exciting as well. Moving on to the last slide. This is a slide that is taking a step back and saying, well, great, we're pretty well set up for the summer, but what's happening in California energy industry in general and procurement specifically that could bring risks, not just this summer, but over the next few years? What are the things that Redwood and TA staff are keeping our eyes on? And so that's what this slide is covering. We already covered in great detail my fourth bullet there, which is the Western organized market expansion. I agree with everything that CalCCA presented. I think with my economist hat firmly on, having one organized market for the majority or an entirety of the West leads to the greatest efficiencies. Unfortunately, where things are going right now is it's looking like we potentially could have two different markets, the CAISO Extended Day Ahead Market or SPP Markets Plus. As I think you guys know, TEA has a nationwide footprint. So we have many clients who operate in SPP markets, the SPP RTO, as well as many clients who work in CAISO, and we have clients coming on who will be in the CAISO Extended Day Ahead Market as well. So we have a viewpoint on all of these. I think everyone in the West would like to have one organized market. The question is, how do we get there? And is there a way to do that and that all potential market participants will be happy with? In particular, I would just say that the CAISO market the way the CAISO is run has a very different flavor and feel to how SPP is run. And so many of the kind of nuanced policy decisions in these two RTOs can have pretty significant impacts in how load serving entities and resources operate in the markets. So it's still a bit of a horse race. We'll see where we get. There is plenty of action at the state level and otherwise to bring about an organized market expansion that makes sense for everyone. Other things to note is that we are in our first full year of operation for the CPUC's new Slice of Day RA program. RA prices have been falling overall. I don't know if that's so much a highlight of the Slice of Day program working well, or more just that we've been building out that capacity. So there's just more resources, more supply to meet that demand, and therefore, a reduction in prices. Anyway, it is working. It's not particularly efficient market. RA never has been, but it's overall functional. So that's something that we're watching, but we're cautiously optimistic about, maybe I will say. Some other things to note is the CEC's power content label will be shifting to an hourly carbon reporting over the next couple of years. And there is rumblings for potentially hourly REC reporting. That will change how market participants think about procuring carbon-free energy and potentially procuring REC energy. Will kind of be a fundamental shift in procurement plans there. And so that's something that we're watching carefully. The CPUC's RCPP is a policy initiative meant to create a new framework that would combine long-term procurement mandates for reliability and clean energy under one single regulatory structure. Right now we have the IRP process, which is looking for long-term procurement for reliability. And then we have the RPS process, which is looking at procuring for clean energy. And so we sort of have these two different programs that sometimes marry quite well and sometimes less. And so the RCPP framework is one that is underway at the CPUC to sort of bring that under one umbrella. We'll see how that goes as well. And then on my last bullet there, I think as the board is quite aware, the new project development headwinds are at an all-time high. Federal policy is a huge impact here. We still have supply chain issues, particularly shortages of component parts, such as substations, that are really critical to building new projects. There are significant interconnection delays within California and within the broader West region, within like the nation overall. And then finally, there are permitting challenges, particularly for transmission, but also for resources, getting new resources permitted to be built. So the combination of all of these different items means that it's a bit wild in the new project development. I feel like we've been operating in that sort of Wild West for a few years now, really since 2021 or so, but it's just gotten harder and harder. So that's something that I'm sure Redwood staff will be discussing with you as they think of launching new project RFPs or bringing new PPAs to the board for consideration. And that is my last slide. I know I throw a lot of information at you, so I'm glad to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Any questions? Board? Anybody? Okay. How about anybody online?
No hands raised.
No hands raised. Beth, do you have a comment anything for us?
No, just in terms of the headwinds, the last sort of bullet there, it definitely something we're keeping an eye on and thinking about. I'm still very much looking to move ahead with the solicitation coming up, perhaps in the fall. So I think we're really interested to see what we get out of that process. kind of see who's willing to keep trying. And then just to point out too, that within the consent agenda, there is those legislative reports that kind of give that summary of kind of all the different things sort of stacked and, the potential consequences of all the different actions happening. So those are just good resources to keep and refer to as you may need them.
Thank you, Beth.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Anything else on this? Okay, moving on.
Do you have to accept it?
Oh, wait a minute, we
still
have
need
to
a vote.
accept it, sorry. Let's see here, what this is staff for?
I will move to accept
Move to accept.
California Summer Market Conditions Assessment 2025 version.
Thank you, Sarah.
Second. I would second.
Please. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Unanimous passes.
Okay, now we can move on. End of CCE business or new business, 10.1, Humboldt Transit Authority, hydrogen fuel project presentation.
Yeah, we've got Jerome Kirazi here from Humboldt Transit Authority. This is a presentation that Director Arroyo asked that we bring, and it's super exciting that Humboldt Transit Authority has hydrogen buses have been arriving. So Jerome's going to give us some background and kind of where we're at with the project.
Thank you. Jerome Kirazi, I'm planner with Humboldt Transit Authority. A little bit of background, I've been at HTA for about 3.5 years. I came over to there when they were awarded a large state grant for hydrogen fueling station, hydrogen buses, a new transit center in Eureka, and various other work. Prior to that, I was at the Schott Center. I was a senior research engineer there. And prior to that, I was actually I forget what my title was, but I worked at Redwood Energy Authority. That's a fun.
Just add one more thing to your resume. Jerome was also a member of our community advisory committee for a number of years.
So thanks. I'm excited to be here to present on what we've been up to so far. First, just kind of stepping back, why is Humboldt Transit Authority looking at hydrogen as a fuel for its transition to zero-emission buses? We did an analysis back in 2020, 2021, where we did a deep dive into the existing routes that we serve, and we realized, based off of experience from battery electric buses that Humboldt Transit Authority had purchased in 2018, as well as performance that we were seeing from other transit agencies, that about half of our routes just simply couldn't be served by battery electric. And even with advancements in technology today, that's still true. So we're looking 6-7 years later, and that's still the case. And we've actually seen early on in this planning process, a number of transit agencies throughout California were really all in on battery electric for numerous reasons. As they've been implementing and rolling out battery electric buses, we've seen a shift where more updated zero-emission transition plans have started incorporating more higher and higher percentages of hydrogen buses because we can get the range out of them. So with that, our current zero-emission transition plan roughly looks like this, where by 2040, we are looking to fully convert our entire fleet to hydrogen. While we can meet quite a few of our runs with battery electric, the primary goal for looking to convert the majority of our buses to hydrogen is to try to distribute fixed costs over a larger volume of fuel to bring down that cost per unit of the blue, represents gasoline, orange is diesel. You'll see we'll have electric vehicles around for quite a while. But as things go, this will change. This is a dynamic or a living document. Humboldt Transit Authority partnered with New Flyer, and a partnership was really about trying to address the deficiency in available buses, where even though you can get the range out of them, they still weren't meeting the range requirements of agencies like us who have really long rural routes. We do multiple runs where buses are out there for 12 to 14 hours, well over 300 miles in a day. The current market wasn't meeting our need. So we partnered with New Flyer and they built us a custom new bus. And this bus actually is officially now on the market for anyone to buy off of the California state procurement contract. There's a lot of transit agencies excited about this. And really what this did is it added about almost 50% fuel capacity, so we can get a much longer range out of the bus. That's the primary difference. And we partnered with the Shot Center and we did a bunch of performance testing on really aggressive routes. We ran this out to Willow Creek. We have a route that goes up there multiple times a day. We ran this on our Redwood transit service, which goes from Trinidad to Scotia. That's our primary core service. And we also ran this down to Ukiah on our new North State Express service, where we do intend to eventually run hydrogen buses on that. And we got fantastic range. It well exceeded what we were anticipating. So I think even in the worst winter days when we're running that heater and we're doing highway speeds, we're getting well over 400 miles. So the vehicle's performing awesome. And we have 10 more on order, and they'll start arriving January of this year. And we are crossing our fingers that the end of this month or early next month, we'll finally see the first hydrogen bus out in service and carrying passengers. And what this bus means is that we can actually now tackle about 2/3 of our actual vehicle blocks in our fleet. And the primary barrier going forward, and we've been working quite a bit with the state and other vehicle manufacturers, is trying to target other vehicle types. That's the primary barrier to being able to convert the rest of our fleet going forward. So yeah, this is a known issue, and there's a lot of challenges, and a lot of the issues that you just heard today around federal level, as well as supply chain issues, and as well as all sorts of things impacting your projects are impacting us as well, slowing this development. We have what's called a temporary hydrogen fueling station on site operating right now. And this is through a company called Linde. And it is fueling our bus. It's working well. It's called a cascade fill. So basically a high pressure tube trailer, which is on the left picture. It is delivered by truck, and it's just hydrogen gas at very high pressure at 7,000 PSI. And then the box in the center of that picture just regulates the flow rate off of that trailer, and it's just the pressure in that trailer just pushes it onto the bus. There's no pumps. It's very simple. It actually plugs into a standard 110 wall outlet. So it's working really well. We have a planned liquid fueling station at Humboldt Transit's yard. So just for orientation, we're located a couple blocks away from Target. And we're looking to put that station, it's a little hard to see on this slide, on the sort of northwest of our property. It'll be on the corner of B Street and First Street. We'll have 2 dispensers in our yard to fuel our buses, and we'll also be putting in a publicly accessible fueling station that can fuel light duty and medium duty vehicles as well. This is an example of what it will look like in our yard. This is a fueling station built by Linde at AC Transit's, one of AC Transit's yards in the East Bay. So it'll look roughly like this. It's about 50 feet by 50 feet. So not too big. It has a 18,000 gallon liquid hydrogen storage tank. I put some nerdy numbers up there. We're looking at about 14,000 kilograms a month, or about a truck delivery per week once we're getting the majority of our vehicles as hydrogen. And also want to state that we are open to serving other fleets in the area, garbage truck fleets or any other sort of heavy fleets that are interested in looking at hydrogen for a potential zero emission option. We don't necessarily want to be the fuel source, but we can be a backup source. We can help them test different technologies, test different vehicles, and be a backup supply just in case. We're definitely interested in trying to help catalyze work that other fleets in the area might be interested in. And then on the public fueling station side, so this is called it's a different fueling pressure. It's a higher fueling pressure. You have a higher fueling pressure on smaller vehicles because you have less space to put fuel tanks. So they increase the pressure so you can get more fuel in a smaller amount of space. There are fuel cell vehicles on the road in California right now, over I think just shy of 10,000 on the road. There's about 35 operating fueling stations throughout the state, and there are numerous more fueling stations in construction. So we actually anticipate that once this is constructed to start seeing drivers from the Bay Area, we'll be able to actually come up here in their fuel cell vehicles. We're also interested in trying to work as before with fleets in the area that might be interested in piloting fuel cell vehicles. There's an example of a FedEx van that's being tested in France. And we know that there is potential interest, particularly in areas like us, because again, they're driving very far distances. They're going out to New York, delivering all over. So they really need that range. And that picture on the right is a picture of what is at AC Transit Station. They also did this same model. That's been there for 13 years now. And that was also built by Lindy. In terms of where we're getting our fuel source, right now it's coming from Lindy's production plant, and that's all the way down in Ontario, California. So our fuel is getting trucked from Ontario all the way up to here. It's quite a haul. But there are very few large industrial gas producers near us. The map on the left gives you a sense, but actually it doesn't do justice. There's a number of the locations on that map are actually producers of gas at a lower pressure than what we need, or they don't produce liquid hydrogen. So only 3 of those dots on that map actually produce liquid hydrogen that are in California or Nevada. So that's just a Google Earth shot of the production plant. It's just right outside of Ontario, and they are in the process of constructing an electrolysis plant. So right now the hydrogen's produced from natural gas, steam methane reformation. So all the hydrogen's from natural gas. By the time our liquid station is online, we'll be getting a minimum of 33% renewable per our contract. But I expect it will be higher to meet low carbon fuel standard requirements. And that'll be coming from electrolysis at the same location using renewable electricity. Also, we are working, like I mentioned before, we're working with local fleets to collaborate with them on potential interest in zero emission vehicles. We're also working on trying to build a regional hydrogen market, and a big part of that is workforce development. And so we do have a first phase funding to start that process to build out what we're going to call North Coast Zero Emission Training Center. This first phase really is focused on transit vehicles and for our staff and our maintenance staff, but we'll have tools and training materials that will be open for use by other curriculum should they develop. And we are in conversations with College of Redwoods and Cal Poly and also regional and state level workforce development partners. And then we're also looking for opportunities to develop or regional demand. There's HTA doesn't want to be the only consumer of hydrogen on, on a rural island located roughly in the middle of nowhere, as people like to tell us. So I think our reliability does rely on having other consumers in our region. Other transit agencies, Mendocino County, Lake County, Shasta, they are all looking at hydrogen. And then also, we've been expressed interest in working with offshore wind development, should there be a synergy there in hydrogen being part of that development, should it fuel trucks or ships, or what that might look like. And then lastly, our TPA, HCOG, they are in the process of kickstarting a project to look at a regional hydrogen network siting project for the North State region. And they've just brought on the consultants for that. And that's really to try to help bring down the barriers to trying to catalyze that. So little old Humboldt Transit Authority is finding itself involved in all sorts of crazy stuff that we hadn't thought 3 years ago, but we're having fun doing it. That's my last slide. I usually like to end on, if I can get it to play. But anyway, just try to always step back and why are we doing this? Because this is very complicated and takes a lot of time, but at the end of the day, this is focused on greenhouse gases. So yeah, do you have any questions?
I have a technology question.
Mhm.
So you're saying the hydrogen is coming from natural gas,
Currently, yes.
and is it being trucked here on hydrogen fueled trucks?
Diesel. Eventually we'll start. So there are hydrogen trucks operating in California right now, primarily in the East Bay. So using, I think they're Hyundai trucks, they're Class 7 trucks, and they're hauling cargo East Bay shipping port. And we expect to see a growth in Class 7 and Class 8 heavy trucks and tractor trailers that are running on hydrogen. And those are all high pressure, what are called H70. So we do eventually expect to see that the fleet from Linde transition to that, and other hydrogen gas suppliers transition to those trucks. We don't know what a timeline looks like.
So the other piece of that question is, if our hydrogen is coming from a fossil fuel, our benefit is that there's a zero carbon emission because the process does not produce carbon emissions in the end. Is that correct?
No, so it does right now, coming from natural gas, it does produce carbon because natural gas has carbon. The net emissions from like per mile completed by a hydrogen vehicle with 100% hydrogen from natural gas, producing natural gas, from a greenhouse gas perspective is worse than running on diesel. From a criteria pollutants perspective, so smog precursors or particulates or those types of other pollutants, it is better. But the long-term goal here is not to just simply transition to hydrogen produced from natural gas. It's to transition to hydrogen produced from renewable electricity. That's the end game. That's the end goal here. And then in that supply chain, there's no carbon. Or very little.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jerome? Okay, how about online?
No hands raised.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, Beth, do you have?
Yeah, I'd just like to wrap up just that, HTA's efforts, I think, are very consistent with what we're trying to accomplish. So I think that may have been why Director Arroyo, suggested the presentation, but I think, it really is tremendous work. Like Jerome mentioned, I think it's another example of, Humboldt County JPA really leading the way and setting the standard. And so, making this technology become more mainstream and kind of getting to that sort of net zero goal. This is the step, and I think it was a very bold move. And, it's another source of pride to get to be here and see that.
I agree, Beth. Thank you. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Nellie, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point, that we are in this period of time where we have to use fossil fuels to make this transition. And I always think about that when we're kind of talking about a transition from, and the supply chain emissions and all of those components in this process. But, when looking at some of the megawatts that we're able to get from solar now as part of our portfolio, and the transition that the state is going through and that the world is going through, it does make me think that we will have those much, much, much lower emissions opportunities. But we do have to kind of bite the bullet, so to speak, with the transition phase. So I think that that's something community members raise a lot. It certainly came up at the battery energy storage workshop last night in our small group conversations. And, anyway, I think it's worth talking about. And we're all kind of planning for this decades away future where we anticipate, hopefully not too many decades, where we anticipate a different way of producing hydrogen.
Being able to establish that fleet and have it for when, this infrastructure starts to become the norm, and that we can, be on the cutting edge of it up here. It's really exciting. And so just, thank you for that, and hoping to see more hydrogen buses on the road. Yeah, it's awesome.
Very quickly. And I also wanted to state that, I think if there is any sort of potential or synergy in local production of hydrogen, if that comes, I think it's come up a couple of times with offshore wind, or if there's sort of a way for it to provide, longer term storage or things of that nature. We're certainly interested in those discussions. I think economically, it's probably pretty challenging at this point to pencil out, but yeah, feel free to reach out.
Thank you. Okay, there was no action on that one. So we're on to 10.2, cost of service electricity rate setting, design, contract award.
Yeah, Lori's going to kick us off on this one.
All right, sorry.
Lori Bandini, I'm the Director of Business Planning and Finance. So last year, our CEA staff became concerned with issues around setting retail electricity rates that stemmed from case law and community choice aggregators in California are subject to Proposition 26, which provides that any. Oh. Okay. Is this better?
Not yet.
I have to turn it on. Okay, done.
No. Yeah.
Really, it sounds exciting to me.
It's pretty much the same.
Okay, sorry.
Maybe
So much for that bright idea.
Talk louder. No. How about for people online though?
They can hear fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think you do have to hold it really close to your face for it to be effective.
Sorry. Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Proposition 26 in California provides that any levy, charge, or exaction of any kind imposed by a local government is taxed and subject to voter approval. For CCA program revenue is a payment for a benefit, privilege, service, or product, and therefore accepted from being a tax under Prop 26, but only if our rates charged capture no more than the cost of the provided service. We were advised that a rate study that establishes a factual basis of cost of service would support this exception. So RCA has generally also been interested in exploring a rate setting approach that diverges from the current practice of PG&E. This is something that, we've all talked about before. Okay, so to get the rate study going, staff issued a request for proposals on April 11th of this year. And we requested a cost of service analysis, a rate design and impact analysis, a rate implementation plan, if RCA then chose to move forward with any changes. We received 6 proposals on June 6th. And then review committee of staff directors completed our review of the 6 proposals on July 8th. This was just a couple of weeks later than we had originally planned. We on track. Okay. Let's see. So the proposal that we received from Nugent Strategies and Solutions scored 98 points out of a possible 100. For reference, the second highest ranking proposal scored 82 points. Our review committee was in easy agreement on recommending awarding a contract to Nugent Strategies and Solutions for their proposed not to exceed cost of $116,900. And I just put up there the evaluation criteria from our request for proposals, which included evaluating the knowledge of electric utility rate setting practices, California energy market, the CCA business model, company experience, key staff qualifications and availability, the plan for providing training and support to our CEA, acceptance of RCA standard agreement, and just overall cost and fees for the scope of services. I just note, I guess, really fast too, that we included $100,000 in this year's budget for the studies, which represented just our best guess at what it would cost. So if the full $116,900 is needed, we have identified contingency funds budgeted under the general administrative accounting services category that we can use. So overall, again, we're recommending awarding the contract to Nugent. So I just want to provide a little overview of Nugent Strategies and Solutions. So they're a firm out of Colorado. And I'm, after I give a little overview, going to invite the project managers and assistant managers, Scott Burnham and Carlo Bencomo-Hasso, to speak and be available for any questions if you, but where he has it online. Yeah. So, but overall, Nugent has completed similar studies for 7 other California CCAs. They provide consulting for CCAs, including our CEA directly, and by way of the Energy Authority, our CEA's power manager. They have demonstrated understanding of the California energy market and issues around Prop 26. They proposed completing the work for the lowest cost, which is a big deal. And overall, the review committee was just impressed with the proposed timeline, which has them completing the full scope of services in just over 6 months. So with that, I'll see if Scott or Carlo would like to introduce themselves.
Yes, good afternoon, board members. My name is Scott Burnham. I'm a partner here at Nugent. Appreciate the opportunity to be before you and appreciate the opportunity to work on this project. I've got Carlo with me as well. Carlo is a consultant in our San Diego office. I'm actually located in Denver. We appreciate this opportunity. Clearly, Prop 26 is a very big concern and issue with utilities in California. We have a lot of experience working on those issues, working with a variety of CCAs as well as a variety of municipal entities, including Riverside and Burbank and some of the areas around the LA Basin, and actually just recently starting a project with your compatriots over in Reading. So looking forward to this opportunity. Really think it's going to be a great opportunity to provide some value and get you guys a solid, defensible cost of service and rate design study. Carla, anything to add?
No, that's great. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to work on this project. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Anything else, Lori? All right. Any questions or comments from the board? Go ahead. Yes.
Sure. We are currently a half cent below PG&E. I'm just wondering what might happen if the study comes back and says we're charging 2.5 too much or less. What might we do? Since it's not really happening now, what if?
I mean, that'll be up to you all, but honestly, I'm nervous.
Oh,
I think this
boy.
needs to be done, and I think it's a good, a good path forward for our CEA, but it's, your guess is as good as mine.
Wait,
Can I just make a comment here about a cost of service analysis in this context? And all of the board members are familiar with this through your own primary agencies, but ultimately, you as the policymakers are going to establish the ultimate parameters of services. And if you find, you have given direction to implement your huge wish list of services that as part of, your CCA load serving obligation, if you find that cost is too expensive, then you will need to come back and reevaluate some of these services that you would like to provide. And I know that's not very specific, but that is really the way it's going to work. My understanding is that the consultants will start with seeing now what the cost, how it lines up, the cost of service with what you're delivering. And then you'll look, if you see that it exceeds more than what the board would like, then you will have to go in and say, well, let's see, how do we reduce our services to save cost?
So we might hope we're close.
Yeah.
And it could have a major impact.
I myself don't know the programs and the costs
General.
well enough to say whether it could or could not, but right.
And I think if I could also add, I think it can have implications beyond the programs. I think you'll find our program dollars are not as robust as maybe we picture them always. This year, our primary, any extra revenue we have, the bulk of it is headed to reserves to meet a reserve policy that, go towards getting us a credit rating and reducing our transaction costs overall. But I do think it could influence also things like what kind of power we procure ultimately, and some of the other goals we have. So I think it can be really wide reaching in terms of the choices we have to make when we see the results of this study. So I think, sort of from a strategic perspective, this sort of dovetails into us also updating our overall strategic plan in a couple, year and a half or so. Because we'll have all this new information and we're going to have to really, kind of have a heart to heart with ourselves, in terms of what we're going for.
Thank you.
Anybody else on the board? Go ahead.
It's hard to hear it here, by the way. I'll just make a statement that for whatever that's worth, this room is not as acoustically as good as it was downstairs. Just opinion, but if I understand what we're being asked to take care of, as somebody has suggested to us, it's kind of like the water and sewer
Mhm.
we have to go through and justify that every so many years. So my question is, will we have to go through this on a 3 to 5 year basis? Are we going to have to do a study like this?
Yep. So unlike water and sewer, where we actually, in the water and sewer context, there is a law that says, dependent on a rate study, the rate study needs to be updated every 5 years. We don't have that in the energy world, but that is a good practice to do the study on a 5-year basis, at least right now. We have one court decision specific to public agencies that are delivering electric energy. We have just one, in analyzing the CCA rate settings. So that may it may expand as all of the Prop 218 litigation, expanded into this huge database.
That's what I'm used to, the 218.
Exactly, the water and sewer coming
The,
from 218, yeah.
Are we, if this thing comes back and we look at it, is there a place, I guess it's where you're saying we have to come to this moment of saying what we cut out or don't cut out? Would we in turn have to raise our rates in order to justify some of this, or lower the rates?
Yeah, that's the policy question. It may be, as Beth pointed out, it may be you want to look at your portfolio and find cheaper sources of energy. You may be able to support a greener portfolio, depending on where this goes. That is going to be ultimately up to the board to decide how it wants to provide this service.
Yeah, and if I could check with the consultants online, it might be helpful if you could let us know the milestones, within these tasks that, might be coming before the board as we go through this 6-month process. It's not happening in a vacuum and then we bring it to you at the end. So if we could.
Yeah, absolutely. Our approach is very collaborative. So the first task, obviously, we're going to have a kickoff meeting. We're going to talk about strategy. We're going to talk about sort of long-term goals for the organization. Then we start getting into the revenue requirement there on task 2. And the revenue requirement is really what we're talking about here. How much money do you need in the future years when we're looking at the period of this rate plan? And then how much money are you generating from your current rates? And so that really informs that process of, do you need to increase rates dramatically to meet your revenue requirement? Do you need to reduce them? Are you over collecting? That's going to help sort of set that tone. And again, we're going to meet with staff and the team there every 2 weeks. And so we'll be checking in, we'll giving them progress about that. So if there are milestones there where it might make sense to come and ask those policy questions, because you're exactly right. There is a lot of policy that goes into this. There's a lot of strategy about what investments the board wants to make. Absolutely, we can present them before you virtually. We can come out there in person, whatever is the best way to do that, to present those different options and talk about the different cost implications of that at a system level before we even get into the different class analysis, which is really the heart of the cost of service, is assigning those revenue requirements, those total dollars then to the customer classes to recover. So there are a lot of sort of checkpoints built into our approach, sort of by just in terms of how we typically approach and really any cost of service and rate design project.
And I may be getting the cart before the horse here, because until they essentially do what they said they have to do, we won't really have answer. But one question was, when you talk about setting rates, classes, is there going to be as many classes as there are now? Or are we going to create new classes or consolidate the amount of classes that we have in the process? So instead of I don't know how many we have, 20 or 30, whatever PG&E has in their tariff book. But are we going to try to pare that down to where there's like 10 classes, or are we going to have to match all the classes that PG&E has and just call them something different? I mean, am I making sense of my question?
Go ahead.
To this gentleman, I guess.
Yeah. Your question actually makes a lot of sense. It does. I think the answer to that question is going to be, will be discussed in that task one relative to the project objectives. Some of the constraints with CCAs, it's hard to add classes because you're constrained with what PG&E offers. There may be an opportunity to consolidate, and it may not necessarily be consolidating, but it might be saying, well, these 2 or 3 classes that PG&E have for, say, medium commercial and all the different variations they call it, we just charge them all the same rate, right? So essentially, we're treating them as one class. It's just in terms of billing and the way that the system works, you are somewhat tied structurally to PG&E. Not to say that you couldn't again consolidate some classes just on a unit cost basis.
All right, well, for my sake, I'll just defer back to that. I'm waiting to see. Are we we're going to get updates on a regular basis? I assume that, and to see where that's going, because there's, I get this is not simple. I mean, I mean, it's going places where the one lady shared earlier about this grid thing, and what I'm hearing on the news, when you can filter the truth out of what you're hearing, there are things in this power industry thing, and I brought it up before to want to hear what the board can find on this AI thing. This AI thing is going to go crazy. You think you're looking for the problem of using non-green energy to create green energy. Sounds a little twisted to me, but that's where we're headed, and it's going to get even more complicated. This Western grid, and now we want to make the grid bigger. We want to get our grid, but they don't want to be a part of this grid because we don't like the guy that's appointing the players in the grid. So this thing is not going to get simpler. So I'm just going to defer back and say what we just anticipate that I'm probably going to get more questions than less as we move ahead.
Yeah, we certainly welcome the opportunity for input from the board. So
I look at this as, when we started this, we just kind of said, hey, let's make our rates a little bit lower than PG&E because that was the launch of the CCA and we needed to be competitive. We needed to make it so people wouldn't opt out. So I kind of look at this as we're growing up a little bit. We really do need to grapple with these issues. Yeah, I totally agree with you, Frank, that this is going to happen. It's good. It's good for us, I think.
I'm going to reiterate again, when this thing was sold, when brought to the city of Rio Dell on 2 occasions to get us to join the JPA, the biggest selling point that we were told was that because PG&E had a large overhead and administrative costs, that the CCA was going to be really great to be handled locally because we didn't have this big glut of people. And so the primary selling point to us, at least what I heard, was that it would be cheaper. And originally it was, I don't know what it was in the height. It was 4%.
Less, I think.
And then it worked down. And at one point, I know on a couple of occasions, it was proposed that we would go above PG&Es. We would go 0.5% above, or when we got tight on our money. And so we're asking, we've added other things to this process. And I think those are actually the better things that make RCEA more viable, particularly when we brought in the tribes to be a part of this. And then we reached out they were able to get grants through this process, or we're able to facilitate those, that they're getting power grids built at the remote ends of the grid in Humboldt County, which is not the same grid that this lady was talking to us about on the Western United States. When you're talking about the grid that sustains Humboldt County, when you get to the tail end of it, it gets really dicey, particularly in the bad weather. Carlotta, Hoopah, and those areas are really beat down. And this is what the RCA, I think, brings to the table. If somebody's going to look at something locally, is that we're able to sustain these places that get beat into a hole on the, when we have storms. The airport microgrid is another one. When we have problems, we're able to sustain that base up there in the airport, that we have that because we have the microgrid and we gain from it. And so however we put this together, I'm looking forward to seeing where it's going to go. It's going to take away some of this routine things that we're rubber stamping, this stuff that we go through and we stamp. It's like the old RCEA. We were approving light bulbs and it was really a waste of time. But there is a real validity in doing this and being able to sustain it. But then there's also, we've been able to put together a 33, 38, depending how you count your nickels on what day of the week, that we have that kind of a reserve. So we're able to generate a lot of money, from what we spend on power and what we spend on power, and then what we charge the people. There's about a $10 million a year. That's what I call the real budget. That's, we spend 60 million and then we sell it for 70 million. So you really have $10 million in there. 5.5 or so, close to 6 of that is in local salaries. 39 people receive extremely good salaries in this county with extremely good benefits. And I don't know of any other, there may be other jurisdictions that, or agencies that have that, but I don't know of any that have that number with those people getting those wages. And that's what this agency does do. And so those are one of the big important things. If I'm going to sell something to people and say, why do I need RCEA? I save a whole $1 a month. I could save, if I wanted to look at a way of saving it, I could just quit. I don't drink coffee, but if I did, and I regularly shopped at Starbucks, if I just quit shopping at Starbucks, I could save 100 times that, in a month, particularly, or in a year. I could, you know what a cup of coffee costs versus $1. And so that's not a very good selling point when I go to somebody who's getting their power bill raised 3 or 4 times a year. They don't equate that to RCA. They just know RCA is a part of it, and they want to opt out. And so the better we do at getting this answers, and if it does come to a place that we have to charge more to do that, I mean, I'm not looking that should happen, but we should be able to explain that, and this agency should be able to market that and say, this is the benefit of having RCA in your community.
And I think another point to what you're saying, Frank, that I feel like what staff has said and what we've talked about at the board level in regards to rates is that doing this kind of cost of service model will actually, it might be higher than PG&E at some points, but also with the volatility of PG&E's rates and how often they're changing them and they're going up, they're going down, that we can provide some stability to our ratepayers too, and consistency of what they're paying month to month, rather than all of a sudden now it's gone up 20% and now it's going back down, and now I'm getting a climate credit and now I'm getting this, and it's hard to even, especially if you're somebody that lives kind of month to month, to be able to plan to pay those bills. And so if we can provide consistency to ratepayers too, I think that is almost just as important as saying, hey, we're 0.5% below PG&E or whatever. Hey, we can promise that you're going to get the same service from us every month and it's going to cost the same. And I think that's a big part of it.
I don't disagree with you. The part that people need to understand with PG&E, that if they go look at their bill, and Richard can correct me if I'm wrong, is the thing that causes PG&E's bill to go up and spike so much on a regular basis is not the generation side of the equation. It's their demand charge is what keeps getting them. And so doing this thing like with Diablo, we're having to subsidize Diablo Canyon to keep Diablo Canyon going. And they have no intention of ever shutting it down. They'll tell you that, but I don't think they'll ever shut it down. They're bringing, if you look across the United States, they're bringing more nuclear. There's nuclear coming up everywhere, that they're trying to bring nuclear plants and develop that. But their cost hikes are demand generated. we need to be able, and I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying, we need to be able to have this rate study and understand where it's at. Just like what happened to our power got, suddenly people, we got the same amount of customers, but they're buying less power. We have to understand that before we can even try to fix it. If we can fix it. And I think we can, I just think we need to understand where we're working. But anyway, good, I appreciate your point.
Richard, did you want to say something? I think.
Yeah, thank
Tried just briefly, but it was, yeah.
Thank you. Just in response to the initial question that Director Wilson brought up about consolidation into fewer rate classes. I spoke with staff from Central Coast Community Energy, which is our sister CCA that first came face to face with this Proposition 26 and the challenge that goes with that. And I asked them about that rate consolidation because when we looked at solicitations that different CCAs had put out, some of them asked about or considered including that in their scope of work. And 3CE did have that in their scope of work when they hired a consultant for this type of work that we're talking about embarking on here. The response I heard from staff was that they had originally set out with the intent of consolidating into fewer rate classes, but once they actually did their rate setting, they chose not to do that. They decided that the administrative complexities of not having their rate classes kind of mirror one-to-one PG&Es outweighed the simplicity benefit of having fewer rate classes.
Good, thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Anybody else on the board? We're really looking forward to this, I can tell. And how about out in our public? No, and then.
Online,
Mike?
we do have one
Perfect.
person, Colin Fisk is asking to speak. Go ahead, Colin.
Thanks. Good evening. This is Colin Fisk. I know it says I'm from CRTP there, but I'm just speaking as an individual. I'm also a member of the Community Advisory Committee, but again, just speaking as an individual right now. I just want to emphasize that, as you all know, RCA has the goals of procuring renewable and clean energy at a more ambitious target than the state does or PG&E does. And from my perspective, setting our own rates can support those goals. And I hope that is the way that staff and the board are looking at it as well. And hopefully even, set a rate structure that can be more equitable in paying for those things. But I just want to, I really think that having those emissions reduction goals is one of the reasons that our CEA exists and that, the CCE program exists. And so I hope that we look at this as an opportunity to support that rather than to, undermine or change those policies. Thanks.
Thank you, Colin. Anybody else? No? Questions?
Well, just say these seem like the folks to do it. This looks like a great proposal, and so I'll make the motion to award this professional services agreement to New Gen.
I'll second that.
And all of the things that are listed.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Unanimous motion.
Unanimous. All right, thank you so much. You can see the flavor of our board, and this is what you're gonna have to deal with.
Excellent, great. We're very excited to work with you guys. Thank you for the opportunity and I look forward to meeting you in person. So.
Us too. Thank you.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks. Take care. Have a good evening.
All righty, folks. So that takes us to staff reports.
Great. I'll give my ED report. You guys haven't heard from me that much this evening, so I feel good about this. So Natalie Director Arroyo did steal some of my thunder about the battery energy storage workshop yesterday, but I will carry on about it because it was wonderful. We had about 70 people in attendance, so that was a really great turnout. And, I think there was a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes that our staff did and also in collaboration with Schatz Energy Research Center And it really showed in the execution of the event. I mean, it was just really well received by the community. I think the turnout also speaks to that we were talking about a topic that people were really eager to hear about. So I think we had some community engagement, and it also gave us ideas that we can continue these kind of dialogues. And we're going to do that in a few different types of formats. So we'll kind of follow up with what we heard through our newsletter and blog posts. We can kind of elaborate on some of the feedback we received, and we can also brainstorm around future workshops that will be valuable for our community. So just really hats off to all the staff that worked so hard on that. Brighton and Richard really, I think, did the heavy lifting, but many of our staff helped out. So glad that we have got that done, and that it was so successful. And then Director Wilson, I think your comments about sort of letting people know, or kind of marketing our CEA and all the good work that we're doing and the value we're bringing to the community. I think that is absolutely a focus of ours this year. So I also wanted to just highlight some events that are coming up in the next month. So we'll be giving a presentation to the Willow Creek Chamber of Commerce. We'll also be out at Arts Alive on August 2nd, and at the Annie and Mary Days in Blue Lake on August 3rd. We'll do a Eureka Library Kids Environmental Fair also in August, and we'll be at the Humboldt County Fair for 2 days on the 16th and 17th. And then we'll do Wiat Day at the Table Bluff Rancheria on the 23rd. So we are definitely making efforts to be out in our community and enjoying just enjoying those interactions. So aside from our outreach, the other big news I wanted to report on was the Cademo project. If you'll remember, last month's board meeting, we received a motion to set a subcommittee to consider authorizing a loan. So that was voted on by the subcommittee, and we're working on the final loan terms with our legal team and the Cademo Corporation. It will be an escrow agreement. One of the things we were really trying to make sure we were very certain on was the refundability of this loan. And, in working with the legal team, it really does seem that posting the escrow directly with Pacific Gas and Electric, with PG&E, will be the best avenue to make sure that we keep control of those funds. So we've worked through all that. The subcommittee made their vote on the 18th, and we expect those final documents to be executed, probably tomorrow or early next week. Because the committee made their vote before the PG&E deadline, which was today, they've been willing to extend it as we figure out the final loan terms, but they know it's coming. So I just really thank everybody for, especially on the subcommittee, it was a lot of very frenzied, quick meetings and a tight turnaround. So especially to Vice Chair Wu and Director Garache, who were in attendance at the voting meeting. So if there's any other questions about that, I'd be happy to take them. And that was, I think, it for my ED update. Oh, one other small, not small, but announcement. There is a biomat workshop that we're hosting, and this is about a bioenergy market adjusting tariff. So this is to see if there's small scale bioenergy producers that might want to get in the market, and it's an invite only workshop, which we'll try to match up developers with potential users. So I don't know, Richard, if you want to announce, share anything more about that workshop.
Sure. Thank you. This is going to happen on August 14th. And like Beth said, we're doing it as invitation only. We're just using our own main meeting room at the 633 3rd Street office. So we have limited capacity, but the idea was to have kind of an intimate conversation between folks who could potentially host these projects. And this could include small scale forest biomass projects. It could be methane from either wastewater treatment plants or food waste digesters or dairy manure. Those all seem like potentially viable projects in various locations in Humboldt County. So we're inviting folks from the public agencies that could potentially host these projects, some folks from the timber industry who are interested in it. And we also are inviting some folks that are working in the permitting realm, who would, be useful to have in this meeting to help people understand what kinds of process that they would need to go through to get these projects permitted. And we've also reached out to the Bioenergy Association of California, and their executive director put us in touch with some developers who are planning to attend. We're doing it as an in-person only meeting too, not trying to do a hybrid meeting because we've found sometimes those don't work so well. We're getting strong indications of a good turnout for it. Hope to fill up the room with interested folks. And the current kind of sword hanging over us is that this program, as set up by the state, will only allow new projects to enroll until the end of this calendar year. We also signed on to a letter from the Bioenergy Association of California, who are trying to get the program extended into future years, so that we have more time to get projects up and running.
Thank you, Richard.
Nope.
All right, well, future agenda items, any requests that requires board action be set by the board for future agenda for staff. Anything that folks on the board would like to talk about at future meetings?
I have one more.
Oh,
But it's
I'd like
related
one
to
more.
this. Sorry, just that we are planning for an AI presentation. We're targeting the September board meeting for that.
Okay.
So it is.
Okay, you said September?
Yay. Could not be more timely. And anything else? Anything else? Yeah.
I'd like to maybe have staff talk about the virtual power plants and how we can get that back on board in Humboldt County. Possibly finding some resilience opportunities in like grocery stores and places that we really need power when the power goes off, but they have flat rooftops, and it would be a great place to have VPPs.
Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, well, with that, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
It's some good work.